Hi, I'm Tatum Smith, and I decided to do my project on monitoring and tracking techniques for North American river otters. Due to their elusive nature and hard-to-reach habitats, North American river otters are difficult to monitor and track. Several methods have been used in the past, such as fecal surveys, bridge surveys, camera trapping, and radio telemetry. However, none of these methods have significantly outperformed the others. For this reason, the pros and cons of each of these methods have been evaluated to decide which method or combination of methods should be used. The first technique I evaluated are fecal surveys, which is when transects are performed to locate latrines, which are sites where otters regularly deposit excrement such as feces, urine, and anal secretions. Once a latrine has been identified, all scat is removed and researchers return periodically to assess new deposits. The data you collect from these surveys may vary. For example, you can look for freshness of scat, the number of scat, or the number of locations with scat in a certain area. In some cases, feces can be collected and used for DNA sampling. The pros of this technique are it is inexpensive, non-invasive, and with DNA testing, fecal samples can be used to identify individuals. Also, depending on how the data is targeted, you can get coarse or fine data. Otters also have high site fidelity and are more likely to be spotted at latrines as opposed to non-latrines. The cons of this are since river otters use scat to mark their territory, surveys could be missing other otters that are warded off. Then if DNA testing is used, this will increase the cost of the fecal survey. And lastly, in comparison to camera trapping, scat surveys have a lower detection rate. The second technique is bridge surveys, which is when bridges are first inspected for signs of otter activity such as tracks or fecal matter. Then, transects are performed along the bridges for a predetermined distance, and the distance between otter activity and the bridge site is recorded. Afterwards, you can either observe directly from a riverbank, if applicable, or use binoculars and stand on the bridge and observe from a distance. The pros of this are that with vehicles you can cover a large geographic distance by traveling to numerous sites. It's also inexpensive and non-invasive, and you can gather spatial and population level data. The cons of this are that non-detection is common since otters can swim under bridges or be difficult to spot. Bridge surveys are also non-random since they are specifically chosen based on signs of otter presence. Efficacy also varies with seasonality. It is found to be more effective in the winter as opposed to the summer. Bridges are also man-made structures, so river otters may avoid them, which could lead to underestimation. It's also difficult to obtain individual data. The third technique is camera trapping. Cameras are typically strapped to trees in the study area and pointed towards the site of interest, an area with signs of otter activity. Cameras can be altered to better suit your study. For example, a faster trigger speed will be useful for an active species like otters. Periodic switching of batteries or SD cards may be necessary depending on the length of the study. After the study, cameras are collected and the pictures need to be sorted through. Higher quality cameras are shown to be more effective. The pros of this are that it's non-invasive. Camera traps can be used to identify individuals so you can gather individual and population data. They can also cover a large geographic area and be placed in areas that are difficult to regularly access. In comparison to scat surveys, cameras also have a higher detection rate. The cons of this are that it's not species-specific. Camera trapping is labor-intensive with the time to set up cameras, perform maintenance, and sort through the pictures. Additionally, cameras can malfunction, be stolen, or damaged, which results in a loss of data. And depending on the type of camera and the amount, camera trapping can be expensive. The last technique is radio telemetry, which is when otters are captured, sedated, and implanted with radio transmitted. These are usually implanted in the peritoneal cavity. Using a receiver and antenna, the otters are then tracked. It is common for otters to also be given some sort of other identifier in case the radio tag fails, such as an ear tag or pit tag at the base of the tail. The pros of this are that you can identify individual otters, you can actively track them and gain spatial data, you can also modify the transmitters to better suit your study, and you can get a greater scope of data like time spent on water versus land, social interactions, and overlapping home ranges between individuals. The cons of this are that it's invasive and it increases the chance of harm to the otter, it's expensive, it is also labor-intensive and requires a lot of trained individuals like trap setters, veterinarians to administer aesthetic and implant the transmitters, and then biologists to actually use the tracking equipment and interpret the data. Lastly, if the radio tag fails, you lose your data and you would have to recapture the otter in order to identify it. My recommendation is that I believe using methods in conjunction with one another is the best way to monitor and track otters. Bridge surveys are the most limiting as they mainly provide spatial and population level data and have the highest chance of non-detection. I think they could be used as a preliminary survey to determine otter presence, but that the other methods are more useful in providing fine and individual data. I think radio telemetry provides the best scope of data since you can get spatial, temporal, individual, and population level data. However, due to the invasiveness of it, I do not think radio telemetry should be the sole method used. I think scat surveys and camera traps used in tandem are the best options since they are non-invasive, provide a variety of data, and are less expensive than radio telemetry. Otter activity is much higher at latrine sites than non-latrine sites, so setting up camera traps in these areas will increase the likelihood of spotting otters. Additionally, you will have two sources of data to compare to one another that target different data, so scat survey can be for frequency of site use and cameras can be for movement between areas. If individual data is more pertinent, in addition to scat surveys and camera traps, you could radio tag a few otters and have them lead you to others since they're highly social. In an ideal situation, you can collaborate with other researchers who track otters in your study area and share data to accompany your scat surveys and camera trapping. I've included my references and I hope that you all enjoyed my presentation. Thank you for listening.